Hello, and welcome to the L. Ron Hubbard Writers and Illustrators of the Future podcast. This is John Goodwin, your host. Today we have a very special guest, Diane Dillon. She's been a judge for the Illustrators of the Future contest since 1998, and I've actually never met her before in person. We've spoken over the phone, and I've very much admired your work quite a bit, and we almost met in New York once at a book expo a few years ago. But anyway, welcome, Diane.
Well, thank you. I'm happy to be here.
I think one of the most amazing quotes, which is one that's on our writersofthefuture.com website, where it's listed you and your husband, Leo, as a judge, where you have this quote, "Dream the dream, aim for the best you can do, and make the next job better than your last." I think that's a really good mantra to have, and something that I think would be very good for aspiring artists too, that are never finishing a job because they want it to be perfect and never realizing that you just keep on getting better and better. So how did you arrive at that as your mantra, or as your way of life with art?
Oh, well, I think just through experience and realizing that we learned everything sort of the hard way. And over the years, we learned what was really important, and to focus on perfecting the work and making it the best we could make. When we were teaching, we told young people always to use the best materials, too.
Oh, so explain that a little bit, like when you mean the best materials.
Okay, all right. Well, then, the important thing with artists is to really understand what they're doing and to know that their work has value maybe in the future. If they've been working and building a name, that in the future their artwork has a value. And we always felt that it was important to tell students to always use the best materials. It's very important that the work, it should have value at some time in their life, and we gave away our work. We didn't think it had any value when we started out, and we didn't even ask for it back when we did a piece for the first 14 years of our career. So we realized that we should cherish our work and take it seriously and have a professional frame of mind. Even though you don't have the confidence, you can have an attitude toward your work, and that that you are a professional. Your name is on the piece. It represents you, and you want it to be the very best it can be.
That makes a lot of sense, and that's something that I've observed, that artists, until they get that recognition, have a difficult time considering that what they're doing is valuable. And I think that's really important, that you've got to take that attitude that your work is valuable.
Right. And a good example is Wally Wood. He was a good friend of ours. We met him when we first were married in 57. And his work has great value now, but he had no idea at the time, nor did Tatiana, who was his wife. And, now she's shocked at prices that his work gets.
Yeah. So how did you become an artist as a profession to begin with?
I think Leo and I both always wanted to be an artist, and we drew a lot when we were young kids. And we grew up in, the 40s and 50s. By the time we became teenagers, we had really no idea what a career in art would be. We didn't know what was available. It was before TV or any digital world. And so we didn't know exactly what that meant. But we knew that we wanted to do something in the art field. I think that for Leo, it was a little more difficult for him because being an African American, he wasn't as encouraged. His parents felt that he wouldn't be able to make a good living being an illustrator.
Right.
Whereas I was kind of encouraged because at that time, as a young girl, I was going to get married and have babies. It was after the World War II, and women had gone out and worked in factories. But after the war, there was a big campaign to get women back into the house again. And so it wasn't thought that I would have a career as a woman. I would probably get married. And my father, even whom I loved dearly, and I knew he loved me, but he told me once as a teenager that if he couldn't afford to send us both to college, that he would really have to send my brother because he would have to take care of the family, and I would be married and have someone take care of me. So that was the thinking back in those days. Well, I guess that's enough for that.
Yes, but that was the thought process, and that's what you had to deal with in order to be able to grow and build a career and a reputation as an artist. Now, what was the type of art that you liked to do? Because obviously it was pre-computer, pre-Photoshop, and what so many people use now. So, what were your favorite forms?
Well, originally when I went to City College in L.A., I thought I wanted to be a fashion designer. My aunt was a head fitter at RKO Studios and gave me patches of cloth, and I had a scrapbook with different pieces of cloth that came from costumes that she had made for the actresses. So I was influenced by that. But when I finally got into City College, I realized that I didn't like that as much as I thought. And so I went for advertising. And when Leo and I met at Parsons, we both were interested more in magazine work and advertising. That was what was kind of sexy at the time.
Yeah.
And the magazine at that time too, it was in the 50s. The artists were actually stars. These magazine illustrators were, Norman Rockwell and Kobe Whitmore, John Whitman. They were stars in their own right, and there would be articles about them in their studios. And magazines were a form of entertainment, mostly in the Midwest, and there was no TV then. So
right.
It's changed now. I think that artists are almost anonymous, except for a tiny little credit maybe in 6-point type in magazines. So we are not the stars anymore. It's interesting, but there's still, I'm sure, many, many great jobs out there that probably I don't even know about now.
Right.
But we started wanting to be in advertising, but after working in it for a while, we found that it didn't offer the creativity that we wanted. When we started working in advertising, we found that a lot of times we had directions as to what to do because the advertising agency had already taken an idea to a client and had come back with sketches even sometimes. And so when they gave it to us, they really wanted us to make their idea a reality. We did a number of pieces that we knew, pencils that we knew we could have done something much better, but they wanted a specific thing. So there wasn't the creativity that we wanted in advertising.
Right.
And so after a while, first of all, as young illustrators and young professionals, when we got out, graduated and started working, we took anything that came in just to stay alive. we would take in book jackets, typography jobs. We would, album covers or book jackets or advertising or whatever,
Right.
just to keep going. So it was important to do whatever we could do, and we learned through that.
When you said album covers, is there any particular one that was your favorite?
Not really. It's hard. Usually our favorite was the one we were working on.
Good answer.
But the wonderful thing about working on different jobs is that you never get bored. We always had something. Every job was a new job, new challenge. So we never were bored working and accepting the challenges that came with it.
Right. So then, did you do a lot of illustration for Harlan Ellison?
Oh, yes. We met Harlan very early in our career. He had seen some of our work and called us. He was working at a publisher's, but he asked if we'd do some covers for him, and we started with that. And we met him finally years later when he came to New York, and actually he stayed with us. It was supposed to be for a few days, but it ended up being several weeks. So we really got to know him pretty well, and we worked with him. Then that was fun. We had a project that we did that we thought up while he was there, where he would sit with a typewriter and type out a story, and then we'd illustrate it, or we would illustrate something. We'd do something in black and white and hand it to him, and he'd type up a story in about 5 minutes.
Wow.
Then we would do a book with illustrated short stories. But then he went to California, and on the way, I think that he sold these things in order to get him to California. So it never became a book.
Yeah. Now, it was noticed that, like, you working with your husband, with Leo, that your work was seamless. Did you actually do the same artwork together?
Yes, we did. It wasn't seamless at the beginning because when we met in high school, we were bitter competitors. We saw each other's work before we even met, and I saw his work and thought, this is the person I have to compete with. And he saw something that I had done and asked who had done it and saw me and said, she's the one I have to beat. So we started out as competitors, and during one season, the class moved, and I sat next to him, and we became friends. And then the idea of working together was born when he got a job. We were still in Parsons, and he had gotten a job doing a poster and asked if I would come over and help him do silkscreen for it. And so that was the first time we worked together before we got married even. But after we got married, we knew that if we each had a career separately, that it wouldn't work. The marriage probably wouldn't last very long. So we decided to join forces and work together. And when we were first married, I was a housewife the way I was supposed to be. Leo got a job at West Park Publishers, and he was editor of a magazine called The Pope and Easter. Mm-hmm. So I was home making hors d'oeuvres for him when he got home, because he'd be so upset having to go through rush hour and come home, and he'd be in a terrible mood. So after about just a few months, we decided to freelance, and at that point we decided we were going to work together. So we did. We had a small apartment with just 3 rooms. So the middle room, and each room was kind of small. They're about 10 feet by 11 feet. Or the front room was about 12 feet by 10 feet. So we had this tiny little center room, which should have been a bedroom, but we turned it into our studio, and our drawing boards were facing each other. And that was about all that would fit into the room with our cabarets. We worked together from that time on.
Wow, that's a great story. And then, so when did you start doing the actual pieces concurrently? Like, where you went from having your illustration pads facing each other to actually being the same?
So we could copy each other, but we each had our own strengths and weaknesses. So it took a while to get used to working together, and we started with woodcuts because that seemed simpler. We did a lot of woodcuts at the beginning, black and white, and that way we had kind of a line to hold us in so that we each knew what our borders were, and we could work together that way. If one did the drawing, the other one could ink in. And so we started with very simple things like that, basically, and learned to pass the work back and forth. And we developed a way of working where we would do thumbnails, because when we would talk to each other, one person would be explaining something, the other one would be nodding as though they knew exactly what they were saying. But when it started to go down on paper, we realized we each had different visions in our minds, even though we were agreeing with the words. So we started talking about our ideas and doing little thumbnails so that we understood what each other was talking about. And from there, with one did the pencil, then the other one would start the finishes, and then we would pass the finishes back and forth. And it was not really a problem after a while, but it did take some years. There were times when one of us would feel that the other one had painted over our best parts. Leo liked to stay up all night, and I was a day person, so when I was sleeping, he'd be working on a job, and then when he was sleeping, I'd be working on it. So we both had to learn that whatever we got, whatever came to us at that point, we could continue on, but not to try to take it back to what we originally had in our minds. So that was the learning process, that we would take the job as it was and then work from that.
Wow. That's amazing, because I know that there are definitely teams out there, and there's various philosophies how to work as teams. We have an article coming out this year in volume 36 about writing teams, but this is fascinating on artistic teams of illustration and painting. So this is very, very helpful. So yeah.
When we got a job with Budweiser, and they were large paintings, we decided to do this up large, and we had the canvas on the easel, and we sat side by side, and we both worked on the painting. The drawing was done. We would both be painting, but our brush strokes were really different. Leo did what he called a scumble, and I did strokes. So we would paint for a couple of hours and then change seats and work over each other's work to blend the styles so that it looked like one person had painted it.
Wow. That's just amazing to me. That it's so good to have also that kind of a relationship to be able to do that, because you're at that point when you're in creativity like that, and it's just it's you pouring yourself into whatever that is. That's so much trust you have to have in your partner to be able to, I would think, to be able to do that and pull it off.
Well, trust is a good word. It did take us some time through that learning process to trust each other. And
Yeah.
but it was also very helpful to have 4 eyes instead of 2, where one of us would see something like an arm that was too long. And, of course, we would get, the hair would prickle on the back of our neck as if somebody's criticizing our work. But it was good in the long run because it caught things like that otherwise we might not have seen. Because when you're working up close on something, you're not really seeing it. Sometimes it's good to get back away from it or get even away from the piece for a while and come back and look at it. With also the trick of looking at it through a mirror where you hold the mirror up and with your back to the painting and look at it through the mirror. Sometimes you can see things that you don't see when you're looking straight at the work. So those were helpful. It was always helpful for us in the long run, but we, sometimes get pretty pissed off at each other.
That sounds pretty good. That sounds real.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. A little bit of a jump here now. So how did you originally get involved with the Illustrators of the Future contest? I had assumed it was Kelly Freas, but I actually don't know.
I was president of the Society of Illustrators at the time and was aware of work for hire and fairness in art. A lot of businesses were trying to get freelancers to do work for hire, which means that you don't really own your own artwork if the person that buys the art owns the art and the copyright. So when we read the rules for judging for the writers and illustrators of the future, we were really impressed with the fact that you not only gave young artists ability to be printed, which is very important because young artists need printed work in their portfolio to show that they can do a job professionally.
Yeah.
And you didn't keep the copyright. The rules were really so fair that we thought we should do it.
And we're very glad you did. Yeah, Kelly was instrumental. I mean, he really enjoyed working. He illustrated several images for L. Ron Hubbard. And so when he was asked to come on board to be the coordinating judge, he jumped at it because he really, appreciated that exact point that you're talking about there. Like the artist is important, and it's not something that's relegated to 6-point type.
Right.
So what do you see as the future of illustration at this point now? From from having gone through a whole long period of evolution of illustration and art.
It's a different world now. I'm not even sure I know of all of the possibilities or jobs that are available for young artists at this point in the digital world. It's like a revolution, and we're in the middle of it, and technology changes quickly. That I don't know. I think that I feel sad in a way that a lot of the artwork originals will be prints rather than the original art, but that's the way of the world now. So I really don't know how it's going to go. It's just changed so fast. When we first started, we could go with our portfolio to see an editor or art director in person and sit there while they looked through the portfolio. Now everything is done over the internet, a lot of it, and sometimes you never even meet an editor or director in person. You send the artwork to them through the internet and don't have to go into the publishers at all, which is great in a way because you can be just about anywhere now in the United States and work, whereas it was really important to be in New York where the publishers were. When we started, we had to go in and see them and meet them and talk with them and deliver the work, whereas now it's an entirely different world.
Yeah. One plus on this, though, is with which we've experienced now with the contests. We have winners this year from Tehran, Iran, and from Bursa, Turkey, as well as from the United Kingdom, Australia. So there's that aspect. The world gets a lot smaller because of the internet, and artists, like our artist, our winner from Iran, he's not able to come to the United States, but we're able to do a video with him that will be played at the awards ceremony. And we're able to, for those artists that are not able to exist in an environment which supports art, they can get that recognition they would not otherwise get.
That's wonderful. Yeah, that's exciting.
Yeah, it is exciting. He was very excited that he's going to, be in this international book now. Any particular other tips or suggestions for artists getting started out or who are maybe frustrated at what to do? Because even though you're not so much in the current fray, you went through a period as well, because it was, prior to the magazines and that type of replications, everybody's seen the art. It had been galleries. People would do their paintings and it'd be up in somebody's home or in some art gallery. And then it became a new world with magazines printing pieces of art that were shown everywhere. So, you went through your own art revolution back then. So any particular tips or advice you would have for aspiring artists?
For one thing, if they're going to be freelancers, it's quite different than going out and getting a job with a publisher or a business somewhere.
Right.
And with freelancing, during the time we grew up, they never wanted to mention money or business in the same sentence as art in the art schools. So when we started, we had our materials and our 2 drawing boards, and we thought we were ready. But in reality, we were really starting a business. We knew nothing about negotiating. We knew nothing about bookkeeping, keep our records straight. We didn't know what the pricing was. So we had to learn the hard way, and there were times when we billed someone twice, and that really hurt because we'd already spent the money, and the publisher realizes that they had paid us twice, and we had to pay them back one of the payments. Things like that. So I think that young artists who are going to freelance need to think of themselves as going into a business and to know how to negotiate and keep their records well. And the Graphic Artists Guild has books that they put out, pricing and ethical guidelines, that I think is good for anyone to look at. And it's not written in stone exactly how much you should charge, but it gives you some kind of an idea of what you should charge, and also the ethical things that you should know about your business. And I think that that's very important.
That's actually something that several of our winners have talked about, where they've got the art part down, but the actual business part has been very poorly, if at all, covered or addressed in art school.
Yeah, that's too bad, I think. It's a mistake. I think they do a lot better now. I know Parsons has a good course in business.
Yeah.
It's very important.
Yeah. Any other particular suggestions or thoughts to aspiring artists based on the principle that the contest is created to provide that inspiration to keep on going and to persist as arts, because the artist actually projects the future of a society, where you see that all the time in movies when somebody designs a new set or new costume, a new hat, that becomes the new style or fashion. So it's the artist that creates that. So any particular suggestions or thoughts for, the aspiring artists on terms of persistence?
Well, yes, I think that you have to love what you're doing enough to go through hard times, there were times when we had biscuits and tea for 3 days because we didn't have any money. And when you're working, the jobs come in uneven, and there are times when there's a lot of space in between where no checks are coming in, and you have to make do. So it's important to love what you do and know that what you're doing, the sacrifices you are taking are for something that you love and that is important in society. You go through the hard times. There was a period early on when we were really starving where I went out and got a job at Macy's in the art department. And I was supposed to start the next Monday. And Leo said, well, what if a job came in and then you're working? He said, this is crazy. And so he said, call him up and tell him you're not coming. And so I did, and we went through the hard times anyway. And jobs did come in, and I was there to work with them.
Wow, that's good. So it was just, you decided that's it, we're going to make this work. And you were just that dedicated. You're
right.
that dedicated.
We're just going to make it work.
Last year, you received the Lifetime Achievement Award. So tell me about that, what that was like getting the Chesley Lifetime Achievement Award.
Well, that was quite an honor. I know that a number of years earlier, we had gotten it together. Leo and I had gotten the Chesley Award. But it's very meaningful because it's from a group of artists themselves. So we really appreciated that. It's very meaningful to have your peers give you an award.
Yeah.
They really know what they're looking at.
That's for sure. And then, were you able to be there for the award?
No. In fact, I didn't even know about it until someone mentioned it just recently, and I looked it up, and then I saw my name there. Then, not too long ago, I got an email that apologized for not being able to get in touch with me sooner, and wanted our address so that they could send the award to me. And I just received it about a couple of weeks ago.
Wow, that's great. I mean, it's definitely quite an honor, and the Chesleys is, like you said, it is. It's a recognition by peers.
It was quite an honor.
So, as we come close to the end of this interview, we know we've talked about a lot of things, but is there anything in particular you would like to relay to other artists, or anything in particular about the contest itself, its value? Writers and Illustrators of the Future contest. Now we're into year 36, and it's going strong. Each year there's more and more entries, and we've got entries from over 175 countries now. So, anything in particular you'd like to say? Well,
one of the things that we always felt was that we wanted to use a lot of different techniques, because to us as artists was the same as words are to a writer, that if you have a great idea in your head, you need to know how to best get that idea down on paper. Your techniques and the style are your way of getting that idea out on paper. And if you're doing something that's very designed and needs sharp edges, you might want to do it in Frisket, which has that sharp edge. Or maybe the job calls for a free painting. But whatever it is, if you have a lot of techniques at your fingertips, you'll be able to express yourself visually on paper. Some editors or art directors feel that you should have one style or one technique to use, so it's easier for them to know who to call when they have a particular job. But I think an artist should have more ability to have variety and express themselves in the freer way.
That makes good sense. And it also, that diversity makes it possible to be a resource. If a job comes up, can you do blah, to be able to say yes.
Right.
That makes very good sense. Well, thank you very much, Diane. It's been a real pleasure being able to speak with you today.
Yes, I did. I enjoyed our conversation greatly, and it was nice talking with you, too.
Great, and thank you all you listeners out there, too, for listening. The Writers of the Future is a contest that was created by L. Ron Hubbard in 1984 to provide a means for aspiring writers, and a few years later, the Illustrators of the Future was created for the aspiring artists as well, because as many times been pointed out by our judges, it is very much a symbiotic relationship between writing and illustration. So you can tune in and listen to it, and we have all types of professional writers and artists, past winners, and a few surprise guests. So again, thank you very much for listening, and thank you, Diane.
Thank you, too. It was a joy talking with you.